without making you guys redo this?
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, first of all, let's say this. With all of the changes with LLP and NextFlex and all of that, those obviously affect build weeks and change some of our plans to some degree. Or, I mean, actually, LLP aligns really well with what we already had in mind, but does require some tweaks. So, everything, as always, is subject to change.
Yeah.
But in general, where we are at right now, I would say and Ed, of course, interrupt at any time and add anything else that you want. We are changing some things about how we plan to execute it. Okay, I'll start from the high level. One of the core things from the new vision for a new build week before LLP was that there would be a consistent group going through their build weeks together. Obviously, when people get to Unit 4, they roll off and new people, Unit 1 people roll on. That has been part of what we've planned since we first started talking about this. And that happens to coincide beautifully with the track team concept in LLP. So that actually takes a big thing off of our plate. We don't have to figure out about forming those teams. They come to us already formed. And not only, our intent was for them to build relationships across the 4 build weeks, but now we get to leverage the fact that they'll know each other and be working together, that entire time, not just in build weeks. So that is actually awesome. And we'll only make what we want to do better. It looks like at this current moment that track teams are going to be within the track only, thus the name track team, and not cross-functional. And that, build weeks has always been cross-functional. And so there's a question of well, what do we do about that? And frankly, right now, and this has not been a finalized decision yet, because it was kind of just came up. Was it yesterday or the day before? Day before. Our first pilot of track teams actually was cross-functional. And then we were told we're going to do web only this time. But my understanding was that it would go back to being cross-functional. But now that is not the case. The plan, it seems, is to keep them all web or DS. Which means we need to change a few things, but I actually think it might be better that way, even in build week. It gives us more flexibility with product, and then labs gets to be where you get to learn about being cross-functional, which gives you more time. It might be maybe a better fit anyway. But that's still kind of TBD. That is not a final decision. I think that we probably will go that way and not be cross-functional. Joshua doesn't know that yet. So he may have some input on that. So that's a couple things kind of relating to LLP that have changed some of what we have had in mind. The next big rock, and that's kind of one of the most important things in the new vision of build weeks, is that they will be individually assessed better than they are right now. There will be the continuity between their projects, in that they will be related to each other, but they will not be collaboratively building on the same project. Your deliverables will be yours alone. We will have existing stable backends that were either built by previous cohorts or were built by Lambda engineers that they'll be working with, and they will have, any other technical deliverables technical aspects that are outside of their realm, those will exist for them. They will not be hitting a student's backend that's in their group, which is a constant pain of where we're at right now, where they have to technically interact with each other. It's a constant sort sore point, and it makes it's bad for student experience. Even though it's good experience, ultimately it's not good for student experience because we don't have, in the time constraints of build weeks and the staffing of build weeks, we don't have the capacity to train them to train them to do that better. That is more happen, that where you have more staff and more time in labs, that happens better. And they're also not brand new to doing these things like they are in build weeks. So we're decoupling that. Also critically important there is that it enables us to individually assess much better. Rubrics are currently intended to be individually assessed. You can hit MVP and pass build week even if your project as a whole doesn't work. But there are also ways, from a student experience side, that sucks. You feel like, you technically passed, but you feel like you failed because your product didn't work. So that's not ideal. But there are also times where it can be difficult to tease out, Ed could speak more to it about the situations where, did this person really, did they really pass on their own, or what, how much help did they get and how much was going on? And with removing TLs and with, the increased emphasis on being sure we're catching people, not getting them past unit 1 if they really shouldn't be there, we need to have that individual assessment be much stronger than it currently is. And so this will help with that regard. You will have your own things to do, and that's it on the technical side. But you will be still in this team, and there will also be kind of a soft skills, like CPD type skills, that will be part of practicing. Students need, all of Jess's work in endorsement and the outcomes team shows that students need more reps in talking about their code, in simulated interview experiences. So presentations within the groups, explaining code to the other people in their group, those kind of things are going to be part of it too. So they are getting, from early on, they're practicing those kind of skills that are going to be super important in their job hunt, rather than that, being backloaded in later in the curriculum. So that's another part of, kind of the decoupling, but also decoupling the technical side, but layering in different kind of teamwork. That also is more suited to where they are at, skill-wise, because when you think about 4 days to churn out a project that you're working on with people you've never worked with before, and you don't really understand their roles, and you're in this pressure cooker, that's like advanced teamwork that they're not ready for in a lot of cases. So it's more suited, the teamwork that we have in mind is more suitable to them and where they're at, and it enables us to prepare them for the job market, and it enables us to assess them individually better. So that's kind of another big chunk there.
Is that already in flight? Have you guys already started to trial that, or?
One thing that we're going to trial it this with current product. Ed's working on it right now, kind of breaking the deliverables down. We will be trying it in a small portion this coming build week. But this is with existing product, not with new products. But we kind of want to see how that's going to work, figure out what we need to, what kind of tweaks we need to make with the product when we develop the new product. But we are conceptually trying it this time.
So will that play out such that when you say product, those are the product ideas and features that they need to, it's all packaged together. Will they choose as a team which one, or individually choose which one they want to do?
No, most likely what we've been doing with track teams, well, historically, the way Build Weeks runs right now, we do something, they get to choose their product, or at least they get to choose they get to say their preference. They have they get 6 choices, Ed, is that right? It's kind of like the way we used to do it in labs. They got to have input in what they wanted. And then Ed and the SLs do this horrible process called drafting, where, taking everyone into account and forming the teams. And it's very time consuming. It's not scalable. It works right now, but it's definitely not optimal. What we've been doing with the track teams is we've just been assigning them a product. We're not getting any input from them. That may change, and we may go more once we have new product ready to go. I don't want to deal with that. I don't think it's useful to deal with it while we're still with this current set of products. When we have new product ready to go, we may go more kind of the labs route, where they get input on maybe a category that they want, and we assign teams that way. But we need to get, for sustainability reasons and scalability reasons, we need to get away from this, like, they're picking what they want, and we're forming the teams as a result. We need to have something that's more automation friendly, and more streamlined and less manual. So
yeah, and then from an assessment standpoint, so if a team got the exact same product, all of them got the same product, they're all working in parallel, though, individually against those same features and trying to deliver something.
Yeah, and they're obviously their individual deliverables vary depending on their unit and what they've been working on that past.
Okay. Yeah, because there's going to be the LLP part of that. Okay. So
right, because you'll have unit 1 through 4 students on each team. So they'll be each of their end results will be related in that they do relate to this, master product, for lack of a better term, but they will have different, their deliverables will be different because their units are different.
Do the current products allow you to look at it from the different, like the 4 unit, like one team with varying units? So like 2 team members have unit 4 features to work on.
We try to avoid having ever more than one unit 4 person, because they're building the back end that the rest of the team's going to work on. We have to do it on rare occasions, but we try to avoid it. But there usually are 2 unit 3 students talking about web. There often are 2 unit 1 students, sometimes 2 unit 2 students. There's more than one student. And the track team concept is 2 students of every unit at each time. Of course, there will be flex and things like that. But actually, that's another place where LLP becomes beneficial to what we want to execute, because that was always going to be a problem. Like, how are we going to handle flexing and all of that when we want to keep these teams consistent through the 4? And now that's not really our problem to solve, because the track team, the track team concept hasn't fully decided how they're going to do that. But for the current working model is that if they flex, they will still stay in the same, they'll stay in the same group. They'll just be in a different unit. But so that obviously we would retain that in build week.
That would actually be nice in that regard. All right. So then who are you working with on the products to try to revamp your products?
Products haven't started yet, because we are leading with learning objectives. So we are working with instruction and curriculum design on ensuring that the current rubrics are okay for build week, but they could be better. And especially the process that we are in right now is like, what should be, throw out what we've got right now. What should we be assessing in each of these units? And that will drive what the product is, rather than like, okay, let's make these products and then we're going to, rejigger things so they, we can make unit 4 do this or that so we can assess them. So it'll probably be Parth, and depending on what Alex's role is, he may be involved, Joshua may be involved when we do get to the product point, but the learning objectives are going to drive that all. So we are intentionally not touching that side of things until we have those learning objectives assessed or determined. And
Yeah,
that's
so
we're in that right now.
yeah, and the product will have to account for all 4 unit
Right.
objectives, right? So,
Yep.
All right. And then, so I'm curious then, with the combination of the track team, which you do have piloted already.
Yeah, we've piloted twice through 2 build weeks in full-time and 1 in part-time. Just small, I mean, not all of build weeks, just
Yeah,
just
a couple of teams.
Yeah, we had 7 teams this last time, and I think 4 the time before. We've only had 1 pilot team in
6 and 3.
Whatchamacallit, in part-time.
Yeah.
And that was this last time.
All right. So what are the main objectives for unit 1, 2, 3, and 4? As you were talking, I realized I've never seen. I know one of the units covers Node backend.
That's unit 4. There's unit 4 is Node or Java. They pick which track they're on.
Yeah, Java's the new one, right?
Yep.
So,
unit 1. Oh, yeah, Ed just dropped the rubrics there. Unit 1 is, intro to JS, HTML, CSS, but they're not like deep enough into JS that they can do much yet.
Yeah,
so
what does that project look like for unit 1 folks? That's where, from my perspective, I wasn't sure how the scaffolding fits in. I know that by unit 4, they should be able to build an app, right? To some degree. So helping them a little bit is beneficial. But with unit 1, if they're just got intro to JavaScript, and maybe CSS, do they just build a web page and that's kind of it? What do they do there?
Marketing. It's a marketing page. There's hardly any JavaScript interaction involved. Even when we were using preprocessors, that's probably, and which we don't anymore, but when we did, that was probably the only consideration that you'd have to give when it comes to building out scaffolding. There's no less library, no Sass, so they're just writing raw. So there's no concern with scaffolding. Those marketing pages traditionally have been 2 per student in case it's not uncommon for having influx of Unit 1 students, and so you have to double up Unit 1 students like on a product. But historically, those quote-unquote marketing pages have just been exactly what you expect. The CTA, contact us, meet the team, things like that. But altogether, pretty independent of the entire team experience. There's really, in a way, they're working with the team, but they, at the risk of maybe, making them sound inconsequential, they are kind of like the most dispensable part of the team, because what they do doesn't exactly affect anybody else's work in the same way that Unit 2 through 4, web, data science, so on.
Starts to integrate, right?
Correct. It's
so
fairly independent.
If you had 2 unit 1s, they're each going to produce 2 pages.
Yes.
Is that
okay? As it is right now? Yes. And those pages like sometimes have consistency with one another, but more often than not, it's kind of just like, I want to use Comic Sans, I want to use Papyrus, and then hilarity ensues when you look at them both side by side.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Unit 2 introduces what into their core?
So Unit 2 is the introduction of React, and I guess you could say applied JavaScript, that is using JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, which is not really something in Unit 1, aside from, understanding event listeners and click handlers and things like that. Like, it doesn't really take grip until Unit 2, when they start working with quote unquote dumb components in React. So functional components, not class components. Though that does look a little bit different now that they're working with hooks. Now everything is a functional component, like class components, I guess, like really aren't as much of a thing in the curriculum, but you yourself understanding the difference of it's not until unit 3 that you get into more say let me put it this way. Unit 2, you're not working with anything like authentication. You're not going to run into any cores issues because fundamentally you're just developing widget components essentially.
Okay. The basics of React, right? That's fair. Okay. So then the front end scaffold that we have could provide them a starting base to add page component, something along those lines. You don't need any of the authentication. You don't need connectivity to a back end, and there's no need in Unit 2 for an external API like Google or whatever, right?
Nope. Well, I actually have to get back. The only time that they would need an external API is if they are pulling from a CDN, I suppose. But really, that's pretty limited. Like maybe they're using an image CDN. Google Fonts is a consideration, though that's more of a Unit 1 thing, considering that's more front end.
That's pretty self-baked into those CDN packages that they add, right?
Yeah.
Again, the cores aspect isn't concerned for them.
God, I hope not.
All right. And then Unit 3, they get into, it sounds like a little deeper. Do they actually have a back end that they need to connect with that's already baked for them?
No. Traditionally, and again, I say traditionally because this is probably going to look a little bit different, but as it is right now, August 7th, 2020, Unit 3 React students are kind of working hand in glove with the Unit 4 students. So without a backend API established, there's nothing that specifically Unit 3 kind of Unit 2 students can consume because they're not able to, Axios call just some backend and get a return, because when it comes to Unit 3, that's when you're dealing with more meticulous components. You're working strictly in class components. You're setting up the routes. The routes are completely inconsequential if you can't test them at the back end. In the event, I should probably add here because it's good for context, no pun intended. The backend developers, sometimes if something happens with any student, we have to find a replacement for them. With Unit 4 students, it's a little bit easier to replace that because we have a lot of these pre-built backends that are already deployed somewhere, and then cloned onto our BuildWeeks Git organization. So it's not necessarily the end of the world if you don't have that backend completed. I mean, even if you have a student who come Wednesday, they're just like, I don't know how to do this, the team isn't going to necessarily be completely derailed. Like if that's the case, then a TL, rather a PL for that team can reach out to myself, Julia, to one of our SLs, and we can get them set up with that.
Okay. So the team, a team that has Unit 3 and 4 on it, on these track teams, the Unit 3 and 4 start off by talking about what 4 is going to build and what 3 is going to build. And by Wednesday-ish, they got to start connecting with one another, right?
Actually, for full time, it's more like Tuesday at lunch. We ask that you have 3 most essential endpoints built out, so you can chew on some data for Unit 3, sometimes Unit 2 as well, but they need to be able to consume something on. There's something has to be rendered on the server to return to the client, because otherwise they're just kind of twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do.
Yeah, mocking out their calls with what they need. All right, so all All right, so that's where the team aspects really starts to happen, is in unit 3 and 4, right, where they have to roll.
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think that it'd be unfair to say that as a blanket statement, because there is a lot of collaboration between Unit 2 and Unit 3, being as that they are central to like the React architecture. They're
Yeah.
building different levels of components, but I would venture to say that they are working just as closely as Unit 3 is working with Unit 4. If anything, Unit 4 is a little bit more independent. They have a little bit more of their druthers to kind of figure out their schema and then come to an agreement with Unit 3. They're not necessarily going to have that,
Yeah.
blueprint session with Unit 2 as much.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But they have to work quickly to establish that contract with the Unit 4 or Unit 3 and 2s,
Yep.
right? And then they got to deliver something quickly, an initial something quickly, and then they got to build out the rest of it, the remaining
as they go. Which, to be fair, what we're asking for them to have ready by Tuesday at lunch is really not asking that much.
Okay. All right. So the scaffolding part needs to be flexible. Anything that is going to find its way into this realm needs to be flexible enough to help Unit 2 through 4. It sounds like Unit 1, this would be overhead, something they need to be taught just to get done what they need to get done, and it doesn't make sense. Unit 2, the scaffold would be a nice, easy thing for them to just start plopping page components onto, right? Because that's their focus, a little bit lower, or not lower level, but the easier tasks, right? And maybe
I think file structure is like a really good example of that, of just like trying to understand,
right?
Yeah, the nesting of these components is going to be a lot more clear to them if they have some kind of template to work with.
Okay.
Because you can get like a real microscope with that, and I've seen some build weeks and even labs projects that really go off the rails with that.
Okay. And then Unit 4 obviously introduces a back-end scaffold, again, giving them the structure, the file structure. They don't do tests. That's not required for Unit 4 build weeks, right? Testing.
It's not required. It's a stretch goal. It really should be required.
I think it should be required, and I want it to be required.
Testing is something,
that, right? As we can get them moving quicker, perhaps that's something that we can bring in.
Exactly.
Obviously, the scaffold we have today already has tests that they can model after and kind of see some examples of. Maybe that helps them, maybe it doesn't. But
you're using Jest for those.
Yeah. So both front end and back end use Jest. Front end adds the RTL, the React testing library.
Yeah.
And then and then we have mocks for database, so that no database is required.
Cool.
So all right. So I think I have a better picture of what goes on in build weeks, how these teams do structure, what a team really is in build weeks, because that was kind of foreign to me. So I really like the individual assessment part. I'll be honest. Working in teams is important, but we can't, like in labs, we can't assess individual students. And I don't think moving forward, we have a good strategy to aid that. Maybe in some areas it's getting a little bit better with the new curriculum that we have. But it seems imperative that we figure out how to, at an individual level, know whether somebody understands the content or not. So I like that. I just want to make sure I'm gonna step back and then write up some notes, and then I'll submit that to you guys and see whether or not the scaffolding, potential solution for scaffolding would be beneficial, and then we can start having some dialogue around that, maybe a couple of 30-minute follow-ups and see what aids, or I just want to make sure I don't introduce something that's going to allow them to cheat. Right. So
Yeah, as it stands right now, when it comes to the subject scaffolding, I mean, honestly, it's something I think is long overdue. But with LLP coming in,
yeah,
it is like a nice swift kick in the ass to kind of roll that. Um, and so, even though things are changing, I mean, it gives us just a good benchmark for where to start instead of just like imagining someday it'll happen.
yeah. So I think we're over time. So if you guys need to jump, please. The current scaffold definitely. I was looking at it yesterday, and in kind of thinking about build weeks. Can we use portions, ignore stuff that might be there? So we do have file structure already baked, already have an opinion, and we've had input from instruction regarding that on the front end and back end. We do have a number of libraries that are already there. So we don't allow, like right now it's Ant Design. We're not allowing them to choose of all the world of design libraries that they could use, right? So it takes away some choices and just gets them on the path moving forward. We have page components that we introduced, again, working with instruction. So, right, there's a folder, and then you create a page, and then you create 3 files that represent that page, or 2 files. And so we have a number of structural items already there. The scaffold would have some examples, some pretty basic examples of what a page. There's one page that's unstyled completely. It might have a header and some text and paragraphs, right? And then we have a list, and it's using an example of a list component. Now that's where we might need to, do we remove that? Is that something that's part of what they need to come up with, is figure out how to build a list component on their own? That's, I think, where the follow-up discussion falls in, because how detailed is the assessment, right?
I mean, for Unit 2, just in a sentence, like any Unit 2 student should be able to uh, propagate through, you know, an array and then spit it out into a list component, I would think. But yeah, you're right. It's probably for another conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the areas where I get concerned, right? Because our current one, I'd love to make the current one just work and say, oh, for build weeks, here's a README. Unit 2 README says, just ignore secure route, right? And here are some baked routes, and you can just replace those basic pages with something, right? With what you need to do. But that scaffold currently has some of these higher order components. And so maybe it's worth just walking through what those are. And so I can list those out and make sure they don't provide, we're not skirting what they need to be assessed on, right? And then back end likewise. All right.
Yeah.
So I feel good. I feel like we'll be able to get you guys something that will help the students first day get out the door quicker. And then it's just, so wrapping that up, making sure we're not technically cheating them. And then the support, what kind of support can I provide through probably September, maybe October, with testing this out and going through what kind of things need to get written up, that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm hopefully the next 2 months I'll be able to support all of this, provide you guys with whatever you feel is needed.
Awesome.
That sounds like news from heaven. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording this. And
We'll take all the support we can get.